All right, welcome to We Think It's Funny with my co-host Danny Lobel.
Hello, Mark.
Good to see you, and look what we have here.
Amazing.
Tom Dreesen.
Tom Dreesen, wow.
You've never met Danny, but let me introduce you.
No, but I sang his song for Danny Boy, the pipes are calling.
Do you know that song, Danny?
Oh, I wrote it.
Do you know what that song is about? I'm Irish Italian.
It's death, isn't it?
My Irish mother taught us to sing that when I was a kid. But years later, I appeared at Notre Dame with Tom Sullivan, the blind singer. And he sang it, and I had heard it 1,000 times, and that night I heard it for the first time. I didn't know what it was. It's a man whose 3 sons had gone to the war and died in the war. Uh-huh. And now he had his last son, Danny, and he had never told his other boys, the Irish pride, he never told them he loved them. And now he got up early in the morning, he's taking his son, Danny, to meet the lads, and they were going to march over the hill and go on and be training for combat. So he made up his mind he was going to tell this son, that he loved him. And when he got there and all the other lads were there and everything, he didn't do that. But he watched his son walk with, and he stayed there the whole day as he watched him go up to the top of the mountain, and they were going down. And as the sun was setting, he began to speak to an empty field. Oh, Danny boy, the pipes of war are calling from glen to glen and over the mountainside, blah, blah, blah. And he sings, and he said, oh, Danny boy, I love you so.
Right.
So, yeah. When he told that story and then he sang the song, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. Yeah.
By the way, the best version I ever heard of that song was Jackie Wilson. Remember him?
Oh, sure,
Singer.
Of course.
He was a 5-octave singer.
Oh, yeah.
And he sang a version of Danny Boy and also My Yiddish Mama. You know, I don't know how you figure that, put those two together.
Oh, my God.
But he was amazing. So I want to start off by asking you about 2 things.
Sure.
And they both have to do with balls.
Okay.
Okay? Not yours, but getting hit in the head with a ball.
Oh, yeah.
And throwing out the first ball at the Cub game. So whichever one you want, take it away.
We'll start getting hit in the well. What he's talking about, Danny. I'm a golfer, an avid golfer, been for years and years. I caddied when I was a boy, et cetera, et cetera. I played in all the golf tournaments, the AT&T, the Pebble Beach for 30 years, the Bob Hope Classic for 30 years. I emceed the Bob Hope Classic when Bob couldn't do it anymore, and the Sinatra tournament 30 years. And I played on a tour called the Celebrity Players Tour. It's basketball, baseball, football, hockey, tennis, and show business people that were 10 handicap or below. So it's Johnny Bench, Mike Schmidt, Mario Lemieux, John Elway, Dan Marino, Michael Jordan. We had 42 Hall of Famers. In show business, it was me, Matt Lauer, Brian Gumbel, Smokey Robinson, Eddie Marinello, et cetera, et cetera. And all those years, I never got hit with a golf ball. Never, and that can happen, even as a caddy. The other day, about a month ago, I'm at my country club, Lakeside, and I'm with a big gambling group that I play with. We're on the 4th tee. I teed off, and I stepped off there, and there's a driving range next to the 4th tee. And somebody hit a driver slice way up over the fence, and I'm standing there talking, and it hit me like a gunshot. I honestly thought I got shot. Blood shot out of my head. If you can see, there's still...
Yeah.
I had 3 stitches put in my head.
Oh, man.
3
you were
stitches
kind enough to show me a picture when it first happened.
When it first happened, it was ugly. You saw how ugly it was. And I put ice on my head, and they rushed me to the locker room. And I thought I was okay because I didn't... I was worried about a concussion. I boxed when I was in the Navy, and I know what a concussion is. Guys had them. I know the symptoms you throw up, or then don't go to sleep right away. Anyhow, so I was monitoring my own self, and then I thought, one of the guys said, you're not stopping bleeding. You better go to the hospital. So I drove myself to St. Joseph's Hospital, and they put 3 stitches in my head. And then that night I went on stage with a bandage on my head, and I told the audience, the bandage on my head, I said, I'm going to get the elephant out of the room. I got hit with a golf ball today. I had 3 stitches put in my head. There wasn't a concussion. They tell me I'm going to be fine. So I just wanted to clear that up. And then I paused, and I said, did I tell you I got hit in the head with a golf ball? Now, the other ball, throwing out the first pitch.
Yeah.
Every year for 20 years, or more than 20 years, I've thrown out the first pitch at Wrigley Field in Chicago. I'm born and raised in Chicago. I'm a Cub fan all my life. And I've been associated with the Cubs. I was first president of the Die Hard Cub fan club. Years ago, I was bat boy for the Cubs. As a grown man, as a celebrity, they'd have a celebrity bat boy. Every year I'd go in for 4 days, and they let me hit batting practice.
Wow.
Let me run the bases, go out in the outfield, catch fly balls. I was like a pig in slop.
Crazy.
And I'd appear in a comedy club. In those days, the Cubs only had a day game, so I'd appear in a comedy club nearby, Zanies, and all the players and their wives would come to the shows at night. Anyhow, so this has been going on, my love affair with the Cubs for years. Harry Carey would sing the seventh inning every year, take me out to the ball game. After he passed away, they would bring us celebrities in, a local coach, a local Chicago Bear, Chicago, whatever, former Chicago Cub. Joe Montaigne and I were tied for doing it the most times. So I did it again this year. However, throwing out the first pitch 2 years ago, let me digress from there. Years ago, 2 women contacted me and said, our mother was your babysitter. I had 8 brothers and sisters. We grew up very poor in the south side of Chicago. My mother was a bartender. These 2 ladies said, our mother changed your diapers on the bar where your mother was a bartender.
Wow.
Now, we get these kind of things when you're
Sure.
in the business. So I checked it out, and my family said, oh, yeah, Mary Cook, she did do that. Because I obviously don't remember that. So they said, we're going to bring her to the game. She's 100 years old. Could we, this is 2 years ago, would you come and take pictures with her? We'll tell you where we're sitting on my cell phone. They text me. I'm talking to the owner of the Cubs prior to the game, Tom Ricketts, and I said, Tom, there's a woman in the stands that's been a Cub fan all of her life, 100 years old. Could I take her out to the mound with me? And he said, is she mobile? I said, oh, that's a good question. I get on the phone. I said to her daughters, if I took your mom to the mound, could she walk out there? They said, walk. She could run out there.
Wow.
I said, really?
Yeah.
This 100-year-old woman goes out to the mound. She's so excited. They put on the scoreboard, comedian Tom Dreesen, blah, blah, blah. With him is his 100-year-old former babysitter, Mary Cook. She kisses the mound. She kisses the mound. Now, she goes in the stands.
And then
People take pictures of her.
Change your diaper on the mat.
she could.
Next year.
Now, last year, she was 101. I took her out to the mound. Same thing this time on the 101-year-old Mary Cook, former Cub, always a Cub fan.
Mm-hmm.
Now she goes out in the stands, love her. They're taking pictures of her and everything. This year, just 2 weeks ago, I took her out to, and she's 102. I took her out to the mound. I'll show you pictures. I got pictures in my phone here.
Wow.
She's 102 years old. She goes out to the mound. This time I told him, I said, do me a favor. She always throws the ball to me, and I throw the ball.
Mm-hmm.
After she did that, I said, let's go forward and let her throw out the first pitch. And, probably nowhere in the history of Major League Baseball has a 102-year-old woman
Throwing out the first pitch. No, no.
And you know what she said to me when we're leaving the mound? She said, let's do this again next year. I said, okay.
Okay. Unbelievable.
My story.
That's amazing.
Truly unbelievable. I have a friend that calls me 2 days a week. He's 98 years old. My friend, Dr. George Stanley. It's amazing to know people that old.
Yeah.
It really is.
That really have all their faculties, and she's sharp as a tack.
And this guy, too, is he needs, he's very slow walking, but, he drags his feet. But he certainly, so welcome. Good to see you. Haven't seen you in a while. We're both, you were talking about flying. You said you don't like it. You and I share something that...
I didn't say I didn't like it. I say
it's tougher now.
Well, no, I just said I love show business. I hate getting there. It's just that
Right.
in and out of airports, I travel.
But you, like me, have flown in a certain way that most people haven't. We've flown private for years. Mm-hmm. Did you hate getting there then?
No.
No.
Well, you toured with Jerry Seinfeld, and I toured with Frank Sinatra for 14 years in 45, 50 cities here. And he had a private jet. Of course, everywhere we went, private jet. If I live in Sherman Oaks, he kept his jet over in Van Nuys.
Sure.
The private jet.
The
But
Jewish airport, very nice.
Van Nuys, yeah.
Very
Very
nice.
nice. Very nice. I like that.
Very nice.
So when it was time to go on the road, a limousine would pull up in front. 2 big guys would come and carry my luggage down. They'd carry me down if I wanted to be. Drive me over to Van Nuys Airport. I'm in the car. They'd pull straight up, Now, if Frank was there, he was always on early, but they'd pull up. They'd take care of my luggage and stuff. But when Frank got there, if he got there, the moment he put his foot on the plane, we took off. Normally we would fly down to Palm Springs and pick him up. Then we'd take off squad cars and we'd land in Buffalo, New York, Rochester, New York, Albany, Omaha, wherever, Lincoln,
Sure.
Nebraska, wherever we landed, squad cars and limousines would rush us to the arena. An hour before the show, we'd get ready for the show, or sometimes half hour. We'd do the show. The moment he finished his final number, New York, let's go, Tommy. Squad cars and limousines rush us back to the jet. We'd be flying over the venue. People weren't even in their cars yet.
Right,
We're on our
right.
way to the next city. Now, Frank passes away, and I'm over at Piedmont saying, you guys got anything? And
Yeah, I don't want a middle seat.
my contracts, I'm sure like yours, my contracts are always first class. I decided if I'm going to fly this much, then I'm
Yeah.
going to fly. You could fly coach and save a whole lot of money so that your children and their spouses could fly first class.
Yeah, but
I
screw
thought,
'em.
I think I'll do
Yeah,
that.
well, you're doing.
Was Frank chatty on the plane, or did he kind of keep to himself?
No, sometimes he had his privacy, but sometimes he'd say, Tommy, come here. I played it by ear. I'm an ex-bartender, too, and I used to read people sometimes. There's some people that you could tell that wanted company and somebody didn't want company. Mm-hmm. The one thing when I recognized about Frank when I first started training with him, he didn't want another fan. He had enough fans. He didn't want you to sit there and say, when I saw you in From Her to Eternity, I mean, I would say to him, what about them Dodgers? They got a new pitcher or something. He said, they did, yeah, whatever.
Sure.
I would talk. He wanted a pal, a buddy. I picked up on that, luckily, because I was a fan. When I was shining shoes in all the bars on the south side of Chicago, Frank was on the jukebox. I was a fan of Frank Sinatra. And I wanted to say, geez, I loved you in Man with the Golden Arm, or, well, you were great in From Here to Eternity, all that. But I knew that would be just that you'd just then be another fan. So we became like, first he was the boss of this magnificent tour. And then after a while, he was like a buddy. And then toward the end of his life, he was more like a father to me.
How so?
Pardon me?
How so? How was he like a father?
He would give me advice on a lot of things. He had a compound down in Rancho Mirage, a huge compound, which once you went inside there, you were in another world.
There's a video on YouTube of that house.
Yes, yeah.
In 20 minutes.
There's a couple of them. But anyhow, so you would go in, there was a tennis courts and swimming pools, all that kind of stuff. He had a main house, but on the outer perimeters, there were bungalows with names, New York, Strangers, and I Tend to Trap My Way, named after songs. So his house guests would be Gregory Peck and his wife Veronique, Kirk Douglas and his wife Ann. It would be Robert Wagner, Joe St. John, Jack Lemmon and his wife Felicia. It'd be Clint Eastwood, whoever he's dating at the time, and so what Frank did, he stayed up till dawn, and he wanted you to hang with him if you would. I would stay down there like 6 times a year. Sometimes it would be we didn't have house guests. It'd be just him and I'd be doing house guests. He'd come to my bungalow at 3:30 in the morning and say, Tommy, let's take a ride. And we'd ride around the desert till the sun came up, because he never went to bed till the sun came up. He was nocturnal. And in those days, he would oftentimes open up to me about growing up in Hoboken, especially toward the end of his life. He got a little more melancholy. But if I had any problem, if I happened to bring it up, he would have a thought about it, a solution about it. I remember when I was going through a divorce, for an example, and I'd come to Las Vegas, and we're opening at the MGM Grand, and he said, hey, you bringing is the wife here with you? And I said, oh, we're going through a divorce, Frank. He said, oh. And he sat me down. He said, Tommy, I can't give you any advice on marriage, but I could give you advice on a divorce, because he had been divorced.
Wow.
He said, stay friends with her. I don't care what your differences are. Stay friends with her. Not for her, not for you, for the children.
Right.
That stay friends with her. They have to see that you're a friend. It's something that, that's just one of the things. He gave me so much advice.
You had that story about when you didn't want to drink with him one night, you went back to your hotel room?
Yeah. There were several nights like that. But,
right.
And, after about 10 years, I toured with him almost 14 years. But, again, he stayed up till dawn every night. One night we did a bunch of one-nighters around the country, and then we landed in Las Vegas. We were going to spend the week at the Desert Inn. And the first night, opening night, after the second show, he's now in the back room like he always does, in the back, and we're about 4 or 5 guys, and we're sitting around. He's going to hang out till dawn. It's like 4:30 in the morning. I get up from the table. I'm tired. I get up from the table, and he said, hey, where you going? I said, I'm going to bed. He said, what for? I said, I got to get up early in the morning, go to the cemetery and visit those guys. He said, what guys? I said, all those guys who died trying to stay up with you every night. And he laughed. He said, go to bed. He made me tell that story all the time,
That's great.
There's another story I told at his funeral. I was a pallbearer at his funeral, and I spoke at his funeral. And the mood in the church, there are thousands of people outside in the audience. In the church was everybody who was anybody in the industry, in our industry. And it was very solemn. Frank Sinatra died. And I was supposed to speak right after communion. The priest said, I'll bring you to the podium right after communion. And so I was in the wings, and I didn't want to cry. I get emotional sometimes about friends, family, and people that passed, your parents and stuff like that. But Frank Sinatra once told me, he said, I'm Irish and I'm Italian. I'm half Sicilian. He's half Sicilian, but he was full-blooded Italian. But he's half Sicilian. He said, Tommy, Sicilians don't cry in public. They cry alone. I said, but I'm half Irish. He said, well, Irish cry when they change bus drivers.
Yeah.
I said,
So what did you talk about?
well, what happened was I'm in the wings, and I didn't want. I can remember Frank saying to me every single night we were going on stage. If I walked by his dressing room, he'd say, "Tommy, you going on?" I said, "Be funny, and be brief." I say, be funny and be brief. So I was thinking, I know he would want me to make them laugh if I could think of something. But prior to that, what preceded that is all the solemnness. Now, the communion's over. I'm in the wings, and I look at the priest to wave me out, and he motions me to stay where I'm at. So I sit there, and the choir starts singing Ave Maria, which all of a sudden at the funerals, when you're at one funeral, it reminds you of all your other funerals, your parents and your buddies and your pal,
Sure.
and all that kind of stuff. So I'm getting a little melancholy. I said, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I'm saying, gee, they ought to paint that over there. I wonder if that's plaster is falling. I'm trying to get my mind. Finally, the song is over, and I look, and the priest motions me to stay where I'm at. Now, it was so quiet in the church, you could hear pews crackling. And over the loudspeaker, Sinatra starts to sing, "Put your dreams away for another day." And the whole church burst into tears. I'm looking out there, there's Vic Damone and Tony Bennett and all of it, his wife, Barbara, his first wife, Nancy, and Mia Farrow, the children. I'm looking out there at all of his friends and family, and they're crying. And I'm going, oh, my God. I started thinking, I wonder if they play bingo here in the basement. I wonder, I'm doing all this stuff to get my mind off it. And finally, the song is over, and the priest motions me out. Now, people are wiping tears out of their eyes. And I walked out, and I said, if you knew Frank Sinatra, and probably everyone in this congregation had experience with him, you knew that he loved to stay up till dawn. It's one of the things you knew about him. He also knew that he was the biggest tipper you ever hung around. And I said, we flew into Fort Lauderdale one night. We were going to do a one-nighter in Daytona, a one-nighter in Sarasota, and a one-nighter in Fort Myers, but then close at the Sunrise Theater in Fort Lauderdale. But the first night we had off. So when the jet landed, the limousines and squad cars rushed us to the hotel. Frank went straight into the lounge, and I knew that. And I went upstairs to my room, and I thought, I'm going to get a good night's sleep, maybe play golf in the morning. I get to my room. I hear a pounding on my door. I'm not there 5 minutes. I hear a pounding on my door. I open. There was a big red-headed bellman, looked like a linebacker for the Miami Dolphins. He said, Mr. Dreesen, Mr. Sinatra wants you down the stairs in the lounge. And I reached in my pocket, and I pulled out a $20 bill. I said, could you tell him you couldn't find me? He said, Mr. Sinatra gave me $100 to tell you he wants you downstairs in the lounge. Now the audience is all laughing.
Yeah, great.
I said, couldn't you just tell him you couldn't find me? He said, Mr. Sinatra said if you resist and I had to drag you down there, he'd give me $200.
Wow.
So now the church broke up. Because I think, as you know, in sitcoms, sometimes there's comic relief. And I didn't plan it that way. But I realized later it got a huge laugh that they needed that comic relief.
Sure.
And it would have pleased him to no end that, make him laugh, Tommy.
Absolutely.
Right. So I know that Mark told me you had the very first biracial comedy team.
Tim Reed and I were America's first black and white comedy team. When you say biracial, sometimes people say, well, you mean Hispanic and this and that. But we were the first black and white comedy team. History shows we were the last. It happened by accident. I never
There
thought
hasn't been another team since?
Never.
Seriously?
No.
Really?
No.
Was it controversial at the time?
Incredibly controversial. It was 1969. Martin Luther King was assassinated 2 years prior to that. Bobby Kennedy. Students were protesting the Vietnam War all over the United Nation. There were race riots in every major city in America, including the neighborhood that I grew up in on the south side of Chicago, one of the largest riots in the country. And then here we were going across the land trying to make people laugh. It's hard to describe because there weren't any comedy clubs in those days. So we worked what they affectionately called the Chitlin Circuit, black-owned, black-operated nightclubs. The High Chaparral in Chicago, the Burning Spear, the Cotton Club, the 20 Grand in Detroit. Motown was in Detroit in those days. There was a club that a gangster owned that all the Motown acts would break their act in there before they went to Vegas. The Sugar Shack in Boston, the Club Harlem in Atlantic City before there was gambling. The Club Harlem, every nightclub you ever worked in America in those days. Let me digress for a minute. Because there weren't any comedy clubs, we couldn't put together 5 minutes and go do an open mic somewhere. We had to put together a nightclub act.
Wow.
At least 20 minutes, 25 minutes to start with. But most nightclubs you worked at in those days, all over the country, you open on a Monday, you closed on a Saturday night. The Club Harlem in Atlantic City, all-black club on Kentucky Avenue. Opening night was Saturday night. At 10 o'clock was first show. 2 o'clock in the morning was the second show. 6 o'clock in the morning was the breakfast show, the third show. And all the waiters and the waitresses and all the night people, but all the pimps and all the hoes from Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Newark, Philadelphia, the pimps brought their ladies down to the Club Harlem. If they had 12 women in their barn, what they called their barn, if the top 3 moneymakers, they brought them down.
Wow.
And it was incredible, like 1,100 black folks in the audience. And they had 5 acts. Mama Lou Parks and her dancers, a big heavyset black woman, had all these young kids that danced the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, get the audience rocking. Then a male singing group, then a female singing group, then comedy, and then maybe the Temptations or the OJs or Smokey Robinson or something. And I'd be the only white guy.
So, did you do material like with your partner where about race?
Yeah, there were some routines.
Like what could you say then you can't say now?
Well, you know, they'd run us out of town on a rail.
Right.
We every stereotype. I grew up in a predominantly black area. I had 8 brothers and sisters. We lived in a shack. You know, 5 of us slept in one bed at one time. So I grew up in a poor neighborhood. So I played basketball on an all-black basketball team. I played football. I was a running back on an all-black football team. All that turned into comedy even to this day, you know. But at that time, Tim was an only child from the South, graduated from Norfolk State College. E.I. DuPont recruited him into Chicago as a marketing rep. He joined the JCs, a civic group that I was in, and I was proposing a drug education program at the time, teaching grade school children the ills of drug abuse, kind of with humor and with records and stuff, getting 8th graders relaxed and then planting the seeds of the ills of drug abuse. And what I was proposing...
Sorry to interrupt. What made you decide you wanted to do that, to work with kids with drug abuse?
Well, because I wasn't involved in drugs, but the JCs were a civic group that attacked the problems of the community. And by doing so, it was young men in those days, 18 to 36, ages 18 to 36. And any problems in the community, we would get together and we'd form a committee and stuff, and we'd work on that problem. And by doing so, we got leadership training programs. We learned how to chair a committee, how to Robert's Rules of Order, how to conduct a meeting. Excuse me.
And how old were you at this time?
I was in my 26, 27.
So you were already back from the military?
Oh yeah, I was out of the service, and I had a wife and 3 kids. And Tim joined the chapter, and I proposed it. He came up to me afterwards and said, "I'd like to work with you on that project." And I already had a guy, a white guy, to helping me on. I said, "Yeah, I'm sorry, but I got a guy." Next day, as fate would have it, my white friend, John DeBoer, called me and said, "I can't do that project with you. I got a new job." I said, "Yeah, what's that black guy's name?" "Oh, yeah, Tim Reed." I get together with him. We start, working on the program. We go into the grade schools, only 8th graders, The moment we walked in the first classroom, I went, "Oh, what a godsend," because the children were black and white. So the moment we walked in the classroom, we got their attention.
Sure.
We were 2 young guys and everything. We played records, got their attention, joked off of one another, and then planted the seeds of the ills of drug abuse, the problems in that community. One day, the program became very successful. One day, a little 8th grade girl walking out of the classroom said, "You guys are funny. You ought to become a comedy team."
Right.
An 8th grade girl, her name was Vicky Sarufka. To this day, we stay in touch.
Vicky?
Vicky Sarufka, that was her name.
Oh, good old Vicky.
Yeah, Vicky, yeah. Anyhow, so when a couple days later, we were sitting around talking. You remember what that little girl said? "Yeah, would you do this?" I said, "I'd do that," but we didn't know the first thing about it. I could always tell a joke when I was bartending and all that stuff when I was in the military, but we start writing what we thought was material, and it was really tough. It was like 4 months of doing that. Finally, we went into a jazz club. When the jazz guys got off, we asked them, could we get up and try out some new material? And the owner said, sure, and they brought us up, and we just went 200 miles an hour. We just wanted to get our lines out.
You remember any of the lines?
Oh, we were hi, we're the Tom, Tim, Tom. He's Tim, I'm Tom. The reason why he's a Tom, you never call a black man Tom, and besides that, I'm the taller of the 2 Tims. But these lines we were going 100 miles an hour. Uh-huh. What might have been 20 minutes was like 6 minutes.
Sure.
We rushed off the stage.
That's what happens to all comedians.
Yeah, when you're new. Yeah.
Or even when you get nervous. All of a sudden, you're supposed to do an hour, and you look, I'm finished, and I got 4 minutes. Leno talks about that.
We rushed the owner into the corner. How'd we do? What'd you think? How'd we do? And the owner said, I don't know how you did. You never gave me a chance to laugh.
To breathe.
Slow down. Come back tomorrow. We went back the next night. Something I had written got a laugh. I can remember like it was yesterday. Something, but it got a laugh. And I remember it was like an epiphany. Oh, it was like one of those B movies where the dark clouds open up and the sun bursts. I said, yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to be a comedian. I'd been wandering aimlessly at that point with a wife and 3 kids from job to job. And I said, this is what I want to do. I want to be a comedian. If the thought that you might make a living making people laugh overwhelmed me. It was a Friday night. I couldn't sleep the whole night. Again,
Sure.
I got up in the morning. I went to church on Saturday morning. There wasn't a service. Went to the church where I had been an altar boy, where I sang in the choir as a little boy, where my mom sang in the choir. I was a little boy, and I prayed. I said, God, I know. I want to be a comedian. If you let me make my living as a comedian, I'm making all these promises. I'll do charities. I'll do this. I'll never ask for anything more. The thought that you could make a living making people laugh, and I got obsessed with it. You know.
So let me ask, you're going from job to job. You're not making a fortune, not making a lot of money, right? Mm-hmm. And now you come home, you got a wife and 3 kids, and you tell your wife, I'm going to be a comedian. How does that sit? Because she can't conceive you're going to make any money at this.
There's no comedy clubs.
There's no comedy clubs.
She thought I lost my mind.
Yeah.
She had a father, and I lived in a blue-collar area. On the south side of Chicago, it's a suburb called Harvey, Illinois, with steel mills and factories. All those people, there was a mantra in the neighborhood, you only deserve in life what you work for. They all worked in those factories. They brought a check home every Friday. Right. Her father worked 42 years in a factory from the ground up to become plant superintendent, brought a check home every Friday.
Right.
That's the kind of guy she married. All of a sudden, I'm telling her, I'm throwing it all out the window. Meanwhile, I was selling life insurance at that time for Columbus Mutual Life Insurance. My very first year of selling life insurance, I was a member of the $1 Million Roundtable. The second year, I quit. The president of the company flew into Chicago, and he said, I've never done this for any other agent, but we've got vested renewals. You've got a great starter. You got to go into such a precarious business. A black guy and a white guy, and these days, the South was still all the Jim Crow,
Sure.
all the Jim Crow stuff. But I knew this is what I want to do. My wife, I said, I know this. Anyhow, long story short, she left me twice. She took the kids and left me. We had the toughest times. I paid dues with Tim Reed that no comedy team probably has ever had to pay.
How so?
And the 4th time on stage, the guy put a lit cigarette out in Tim's face. Came off the stage, took a drag off a cigarette and smashed it in his face.
Was it a black and white thing?
Yeah, he was a big racist guy. He found out later on he was a big guy too.
It's got to be that. It's not that he couldn't find an ashtray.
Yeah.
Well, I threw a punch. I got up and I threw a punch at the guy, and he pulled me over. He slipped, he deked out of the way, and I went over his shoulder. He pulled me across the table and almost crushed me. He picked me up in the air, my legs, smashed him on the table. 2 guys from over the bar jumped over the bar, and it became a huge Donnybrook, just all kinds of fighting. And long story short, we're getting in the car. Tim and I had only been on stage 4 times at that time. It was in Chicago Heights, Illinois. We get in the car, and Tim was all bruised up, and my chest, I felt like I was never going to breathe again. He said, welcome to show business. So,
wow.
A year later, I got University of Illinois, went outside, made a snowball, and hit me right in the face with it, threw it on the stage while I was on stage.
So Tim didn't have any showbiz in his...
None. No showbiz experience, nor I. But, I mean, people love what we did. But there was just that one element. Interesting thing about racism in those days, if we worked a black club and there was a black guy who hated white people, hated them with a passion, he wasn't mad at me. He was mad at Tim for being with me. See, Tim would be an Uncle Tom. If there was a redneck, a white guy who hated black people with a passion, he wasn't mad at Tim. He was mad at me for being with Tim.
I'm reading a biography on Willie Mays now. And he grew up at a time when black and white kids weren't even allowed to play together.
That's right.
The cops would come, black and white kids, and they loved Willie because they would play baseball, and everybody wanted Willie on their team. He's slugging away at 12 years old. And the cops would break them up, leave, and then they get back in.
Yeah.
So you're basically going into very dangerous waters every time you 2 would perform at first.
Well, not only dangerous, not so much, we didn't know if they were dangerous waters. You don't know that, and with that, first of all, you could be in a rowdy, noisy club in those days, and people were noisy, and we'd walk on stage and hush. We'd come over to God.
Hopefully you bought one of your life insurance policies that you were selling.
What is this all about? But the majority of people love what we did, black and white.
By the way, that's a good question. Did you sell yourself a policy?
I was insured by my own company, yeah, of course.
They were. And then when you left,
When I left, I kept the policy.
Like
I actually kept the policy going on my son as well, my children and my family as well.
Did you
But-
sell everybody? By the way, I hear no life insurance salesmen. As soon as they get the job, they try to reach out to everyone in their family, right? You want to get everybody you know first.
Yeah. That's what they do also with vacuum cleaner.
Right.
I sell with family vac, and the people who sell vacuum cleaners know that they're going to sell 4 or 5 with grandma.
And blenders,
Yeah.
the guys that sell the
Tupperware.
yeah.
But in life insurance, I knew that there was always the woman who was interested in life insurance. So I would sit down and I would talk to both of them, and I'd say, "I didn't come here to sell you life insurance. I want optional retirement income. Is there life insurance involved?
Nice.
Of course. If anything happens to you,
Is that
we want
because
to
the
take
women
care.
outlive the men?
But in most cases, that's true. But again, in fact,
My-
you
And
know,
women, I think, are more frightened to be left, especially in those days. They didn't work.
yeah.
They didn't have an income. It all
They
depended on
didn't
the
have-
guy.
My friend just sent me this Alan King bit to watch.
I was just
Survived
going to
by
say,
his wife.
Yeah,
Have you seen that?
survived by his wife.
It's one of the great
Yeah.
routines of
One
all
of the
time.
great-
Yeah.
However, so what I did, I didn't call it life insurance. I called it optional retirement income. I would tell them, if you're going to give $22 a month or whatever it was, $16 a month to us, yes, will we insure your family? Yes. But I'd give them a printout, a computer printout in those days, saying, this is how much money you'll pay into us, and we want you to live. And when you're at age 65, you're going to get 2.5 times your money back. So it's a savings, a forced savings. I called it not life insurance, optional retirement income. And of course, there is life insurance involved. If anything happens, you want to take care of your family. Then I got him interested. And meanwhile, because I was in the JCs and I was doing all sorts of civic
I'm
projects.
ready to buy it. you
Yeah,
know?
put me down.
I was involved in community affairs, so my picture was in the local newspaper a lot. So a lot of times when I was making a cold call, it wasn't a cold call. They said, "Oh, I know who you are. You're the guy that's doing." I once went to a judge and said, rather than sentence kids to jail for misdemeanors, to juvenile detention home where we lived, I said, sentence them to clean the streets and the alleys, and I'll muster them every week, and we'll clean. You sentence them to 30 hours, 50 hours. They'd do 8 hours on a Saturday. I'd go on a Saturday with them and take them to alleys and stuff like that. My brother was a professional photographer. I had him take pictures of the alley before and then after. So I was getting local publicity. So a lot of times the cold calls were not cold calls. They say, "Oh, I know who you are." So I had an entree, you know. I was so successful that the first year, as I said earlier, I was a member of the $1 Million Round Table. And then the second year I quit to go in the show business.
Right,
you know.
sure.
Right.
Well, I had a job. I was a mailman. And when you quit being a mailman, they can't believe it. You know, the heads, and they called me in and they questioned me. They said, "Is anybody harassing you? Are they, doing anything to you? Why are you leaving this job? You're set for life." And I had to fill out forms in triplicate for, before they would let me actually quit the,
So you did 61 Tonight Show appearances. You probably have some advice for comics like me who haven't done a Tonight Show yet, who want to. What do you think?
well, first of all, it's a different Tonight Show.
But still, it's still doing late
Johnny's
night.
not there anymore. I don't know. He's not really. He doesn't want
Danny,
to.
that question's asked to me by, I give motivation talks around the country, and I do a specific one for comedians. I talk on 4 subjects: perception, visualization, self-talk, and develop a sense of humor. And I elaborate on those points. What I do for comedians, it's called the joy of stand-up comedy and how to get there. But I'm often asked about, have you got some advice on how you can make it as a comedian? When I started out, there was a stairway to stardom, excuse me, for comedians. It was The Tonight Show.
That's right.
One appearance on The Tonight Show, your whole life changed. Freddie Prinze did one appearance, he got a sitcom the next day.
Roseanne Barr.
Pardon me?
Roseanne
Barr. I did one appearance. CBS signed me to a development deal the following day. I was in the unemployment line with a wife and 3 kids, and the next day, CBS, William Morris signed me like 2 days later. I got a check for $10,000. This is in 1975. I got a check for $10,000, what they call a holding fee, and I got $1,850 a month for a year. In that moment, I had a wife and 3 kids. My wife had left me several times. I finally got her back.
And you told her, "I'm quitting show business. I'm going back into insurance now."
I should have. But for the first time in my
Out the door she is again now.
But for the first time in my comedy career, for the year, my rent was paid, my groceries were paid, the shoes, the kids, and I could write material. So in those days, there was a stairway. Today, you know better than I, it's social media.
Right.
Social media. I go to the Laugh Factory on weekends, or I'll go to the Comedy Store, I'll go to Flappers. Flappers will film you, the Laugh Factory will film you Comedy Store is going to do it soon.
Comedy Magical will film you too.
They film it. Okay. Well, when I leave Flappers sometimes, before I get home, they got a link of that 12-minute
same
set
here
that
at
I
Comedy
did.
Magical,
Okay.
yeah.
Now, you can take that, you can go inside that, that's 12 minutes, and edit out 1 minute. You go on Instagram. I had 2 jokes on Instagram a while back. They got, like, I think it was 2.5 million on one thing, and then like 1.6 million on TikTok or something. That's like doing a talk show that
Right.
night with one joke. You're not giving away all your material. Just one clever joke. So the social media is the way to stardom today for comedians.
I get that, but I want to ask you specifically, like, even if it's not the thing anymore, I'm ambitious to want to do a late night set. Is there advice to preparing, having done it 61 times?
Sure. What I did was we're in show business. That's 2 words, show and business. When I wanted to be on the Tonight Show, I would watch the Tonight Show and say, what are those comedians doing that I could do? And what I realized was they were writing material that could make grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, and the kids laugh. I had to write material that could make the family laugh. I couldn't say damn. I couldn't say go to hell. Now, and the shows have loosened up a little bit. But watch the comedians that are on there and say, if you watch, you can get them off the YouTube. You can watch about 10 of the comedians that are doing the show and say, and you'll get an idea. Okay, that's a kind of presentation. Then, of course, you got to contact them. That's the other key. If you don't have an agent, how do I get my material to them? You talk to somebody who did the show. And say to them, you did Kimmel's show or you did Fallon's show so many times. How did you get on? And then especially if you know somebody that likes what you do,
Right.
and they got on, say, help me get to the person that books that show.
You're dead then in the water.
Yeah, nobody.
Nobody likes any of his stuff.
Did you have any rituals that you do before you go out there, or anything specific?
Let me again. Part of my motivation talks, perception, visualization, self-talk, and develop a sense of humor. One of the books that changed my life, I've read literally hundreds of books on the powers of the mind, all the way back to Norman Vincent Peale and Power of Positive Thinking, A Guide to Confident Living, et cetera, Positive Mental Attitude, Think and Grow Rich, Psycho-Cybernetics. I've read 100 books. The one book that changed my life really the most was called The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. Whatever the mind can see and believe it will achieve was written thousands of years ago. I think it's biblical in nature. But whatever the mind, I realized how the subconscious mind worked, that if you could see it, feel it, and believe it, you were sending out the message, this is what I want. This is the vehicle that we're brought in. Okay? The pilot who takes a 747 every day from L.A. to Boston, doesn't drive to the airport 100 miles an hour, drive out to the tarmac, run aboard the aircraft, take off down the runway and say, now where am I going? He files a flight plan. So most comedians, when they're thinking about doing a show, when we're new, like when I was brand new and on Monday, if I was thinking about doing a show Friday, I would always envision what if this doesn't work? What if that doesn't work? My hands would start to sweat. My heart would start to pound. The subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between the truth and fiction. You were programming a negative in there, so it reacted to that. This book taught me how to cancel, delete that, and envision me succeeding. So the ritual before I would appear on the Tonight Show, I would always, or any show, even to this day, but whenever my mind would think negative, I'd cancel, and I'd see myself having so much fun. The moment the light hit me, calm would come over me. That light was going to bring the calm over me. I'd walk out, and I was having fun. And the old rule in show business, have fun, and the audience has fun.
Fun with you.
If you're having fun, they're having fun. So I would see it, the ritual was always seeing it working, always seeing it, enjoying. My first appearance on the Tonight Show, there's no describing the pressure in those days. They took me in makeup. They take me up to my dressing room.
Like going to the electric chair.
Oh, yeah.
The closest thing.
Because in those days, 28 million people watched that show.
It was so frightening to me, too.
Yeah.
I've never been so frightened.
Yeah.
He's still shaking over it.
Oh.
So, by the way, I use your method of seeing, believing, thinking. Like tonight, I want to make love to my wife. Before I get home, I see it, I think it, I believe it. It's never worked. Well, I've tried this for years and years. Just...
Well, maybe you're thinking about it too strong. By the time you get there, it's
she's
over.
sound asleep.
Maybe you should think about having it with another woman.
There you go.
or
Oh, boy.
if you want her to enjoy it, thinking about her having with another guy.
Yeah, hey, at least she's having some fun.
Yeah, right.
You know
I
how-
have to, but you?
Yeah.
as comics, we're always running material by each other, and I know that Mark and Jerry run material still before they go on stage. Did Frank Sinatra run material as a musician, as a singer by you?
No. He
Or even
he
funny
never,
stuff. Did he ask you about, is this funny?
Frank never criticized. He always liked but the only thing he ever said to me one time, and it's funny, because off stage he was a street guy like me. I don't have a degree from academia. I got a doctorate from the streets, and Frank was the same kind of guy, a street guy. But for one time, at Caesars, there was a guy who wasn't heckling me, talking about earlier. I qualify hecklers. The guy was hollering something out. Now, if I would have blurted something right back to him, shut up, whatever, whatever stupid remark you make, the audience doesn't get it. They're not in on it. Never leave the audience out of it. So what I would do, I would say to the guy, would say, I'm sorry. What did he say? Whatever he said, then I would repeat that through the microphone because the people in the back don't know. No matter how clever your retort is, pow, you nailed them. If they weren't in on it,
You got to repeat it.
you repeat it. I would repeat it back to the microphone, and I would keep giving the person whatever they're saying. And almost always, it wasn't a bad guy. It would be a guy who was really having fun. He might have said, "We love you," and you thought he said, "Go fuck yourself," or something like that. I don't know if we can swear on this thing, but But,
We don't, but it's
yeah.
okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Anyhow, well, you might think that's what he said. So you qualify your heckler, and I'd get him to repeat it. Well, I was having a guy like that night, and Frank was in the wings. Listen, I'm pretty sure I established that the guy was a little bit drunk and a little bit wacky, and the whole crowd liked him, and it was in it. But then he said something about himself, and I said, "No shit," and it got a huge laugh because we'd already established what kind of guy he was. Later, Frank came up to me and said, "Tommy, that was really funny, but you don't have to swear to be funny. You're funny without swearing." Now imagine that today. Today, that's as mild
I do have comics come over to me and tell me it's amazing how we're clean, even though they don't. And I'll watch them sometimes and I'll go, they could if they really wanted to, because some of those things that they say, they can easily pull out.
Usually, what's funny is not the curse; it's just used to.
But even Carlin himself said every once in a while he'd throw in those words because by peppering it, he knew it would.
Right.
You want to know? I'll give you a classic example of what you just said. I was at the Laugh Factory about a year ago. I'm getting ready to go on. I've got some new material, and I'm looking at. And around the corner, I didn't see these guys. Two young comedians start talking. One of them said, Tom Dreesen is here. My ears perked up. The other guy said, "Yeah, he's old school." And the other comedian said, "What do you mean he's old school?" He said, "Well, he doesn't use the F word." And the other comedian said, "He doesn't use the F word. What does he use for adjectives?" And I went around the corner and I said, "Adjectives."
Wow, very good.
So,
Yes.
but Frank never ran ideas for like lyrics by you or anything like.
No. Music was his. Music was his thing.
but if he thought something was funny, he would.
He would always.
tried.
He would compliment me. I gave him things sometimes to say, that I thought would be funny. Then he would try them out, and a couple times he did very. He wasn't a real good. To be honest with you, he wasn't
great.
Not good at Dean Martin.
Amazing.
Great
Amazing.
comedian. Dick Martin from Ronan Martin said to me one time, "Dean Martin's the most underrated comedian that ever lived." And I said, "Dean Martin's a singer." He said, "No. He was a comedian."
Jerry said he was the best straight man that ever lived.
I think I've told you this, but Norm Macdonald, when they interviewed him, they said, "Who was your biggest comedic influence?" He said, "Dean Martin."
I would believe it. Dean knew how. I was with a comedy team 6 years. There's a real strategy there. You got to really know not to step on his laugh, not when the laugh is going up. There's timing. All that stuff is important. Dean knew when to let Jerry go all over, but he knew when to bring him back in. He could bring him back in, pow, and set up the next line. He was genius.
Being
at
a
that.
straight stand-up, you don't have to talk to anybody and wait for them to finish, and then you start. We're talking to the audience.
If you dissect comedy, it gets boring. But basically, I can teach you a lot of things about stand-up comedy, and Mark and we can
Believe
teach
me,
each
I
other.
can learn a lot myself.
But we're lifelong learners. We really are lifelong learners.
Absolutely.
But the one thing I can't teach you is timing. You either have it or you don't. Now, when I try to explain to new comedians what timing is, laughter is sound. It goes up and then it comes down. Let's just take a pond of water. There's a big pond of water, and you throw a rock as high as you can. and it goes all the way up, and then it starts to come down, and then hits the pond, and then it ripples across. Pretend that's laughter. Some nights when I'm out there, I never when it's on its way up, do I go to my next line. I just stepped on my own laugh, or my partner's laugh if I'm doing a comedy routine. So some nights, when it's right here, I move on the next line. Some nights it's when it's right here. Some nights I let it hit the pond, and some nights I let it hit the pond and ripple all the way across, and then I move. I can't tell you before I go out there, and you can't either, because every audience is different. Mm-hmm. If I did 40 minutes tonight at the Laugh Factory and took that same piece of material and opened for Frank Sinatra for 40 minutes, that same piece of material has a totally different dynamic in front of 200 people in front of 20,000. So it's knowing the timing, it's knowing when to move off of that next line, and especially with a comedy team, But I'll tell you a quick story about singing with Frank. One night in the dressing room, his dressing room was next to mine. I'm waiting to go on. I've got like 10 minutes going on. And I'm going, "You will be my music. You will be my song." The door opens up, and Frank Sinatra went, this is what he did. He went, and then he walked away. I went, my God.
I'm not going to sing anymore.
He didn't say one word, but he said 100 words,
Yeah. You ever peek out? I've done this with Jerry many times. It's 8,000 people, and before you go on, you peek out and just look at them and go, who am I to talk to these people?
Yeah.
Just a little microphone, a light on it, a little stool. What kind of nuts do I have to go out and think that I have something so important, so funny to say to these people? Right? You've peeked through the curtain.
Yeah. That's why it's a precarious business. But this is what I say to the young comedians. This is what it is. It's a conversation, not a presentation. I write that on the blackboard, and I'll say, if you don't remember anything I say, it's a conversation, not a presentation. Is it your act? You damn right it's your act. It's your job to make it look like it's not an act. So when you walk out there, most young comedians are entertainers. We feel like we're invading their territory. This is their house. Bullshit. This is our house. This is our house. It's like your wife would say, Danny, there's 20 people in the living room. I don't have dinner ready yet. Danny, Danny, go tell them about some of those stories that you tell. Mm-hmm. Tell them about when you were growing up and when you went to school and your parents were. So you walk out and you're in the living room, you would say, dinner's going to be ready in about 20 minutes. I got to tell you something. I'm on my way to Ralph's today. And that's what we do when we walk out to that audience. They're in our house. If you think that you're invading their territory, you've already put yourself in a negative situation. I got to win them over. No, you're opening that curtain and say, I'll be damned. Look who's in our house.
Yeah.
How did all these people get into my room?
Yeah, exactly. The same kind of mentality that this is our. The first time I ever appeared at Caesar's Palace, I was touring with Sammy Davis Jr. I'd never worked Las Vegas. 1977, Sammy took me there in January 1977. Caesar's Palace. I got a dressing room, my name on the dressing room. This is big time. Sammy did a rehearsal in the afternoon. Now, no one's in there. It's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Show starts at 8 o'clock. So I'm walking the stage. I walked out on the stage. I just wanted to get familiar with this stage. Sammy came out of his dressing room and he saw me. He said, "You a little bit nervous, babe?" I said, "Well, I'm opening for you, and I'm at Caesar's Palace. I never worked Vegas before." He said, "See these boards here on the stage? You earned every single one of those boards. You belong here. This is your stage. They can't take that from you. Wow. If they could do what you do, they'd be up here. They can't. They're out there. You earned every one of these boards on the stage. This is our house. Let's have some fun."
That's great.
And then you went to your dressing room and you sang, "Mr. Bojangles," and he opened the door, looked at you, and
he wasn't sure he was looking at him because
want to hear the greatest performance I ever saw on stage?
Yes, I do. Thank you, by the way. I didn't think you'd bring that up about me.
And it was when you and I worked the Laugh Factory.
The Laugh Factory, that was the best show ever in the history of our career.
But before I was ever single, I was with Tim Reed, as I told you earlier, a black-white comedy team. Every year in Chicago, they had a big celebration one week at the International Amphitheater in Chicago. All the black businessmen from all over the world, all over the United States, all over the world, would bring their businesses there and interchange ideas, synergy and all that stuff. And it culminated with a show at the end. And the show was every black artist in America would come in and sing 3 songs, 2 songs, every comedian. And so it was 15,000 people in the audience, and it was just the greatest show you ever saw. All of us comedians, Chicago comedians, would be in the wings. Now, I'm the only white guy there because I'm with the comedy team, Tim Reed and I. So when they needed to strike the stage, if we got a singer, they'd say, Mark, you go up and do 5 minutes, strike the stage. So the comedians waited. I waited like 6 hours, but I didn't mind. I'm watching the OJs, Temptations, Smokey Robinson, Gladys Knight, and the Pips,
Wow.
and Diana Ross and the Supreme. I mean, all these incredible acts coming in, and they're all performing. So Sammy Davis had flown 3,500 miles to come in to do this show. He had been overseas. 4 months prior to that, Sammy Davis Jr. was at the White House where President Nixon gave him an award. And Sammy was a hugger. So when President gave him an award, he hugged President Nixon and thanked him. That picture of him hugging Nixon went on the cover of Jet, the cover of Ebony, and all throughout all the black community. And Sammy, they were very anti-Nixon. African Americans were very anti-Nixon. So Sammy became persona non grata in the black community because he hugged Nixon. But if you knew Sammy, he hugged stop signs. He hugged everybody. He just hugged everybody. But now he comes backstage, and all of us backstage, oh my God, Sammy Davis Jr. with his entourage, Sammy Davis Jr. Of course, I didn't know him at the time. Now the MC goes out and said, ladies and gentlemen, blah, 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 welcome Sammy Davis Jr. And they boos and the jeers. Get off the stage,
Really?
you Uncle Tom MF,
Wow.
you white man's N-word. Get up, boo.
Unbelievable.
Screaming so loud that his conductor, George Rhodes, had the headphones on. He was trying to get George into the countdown for the music to drown out the boos. And George couldn't hear. Anyhow, Sammy stood there while they jeered and they booed and they screamed and called him names. All of us backstage had knots in our stomach. Sammy, the MC came out. He quieted the audience down. Excuse me. He said, folks, what is our struggle all about if it isn't about individual freedom? He said, isn't it, that's what we're fighting for, that a man could be a Protestant, a Catholic, a Jew, a Democrat, a Republican? Isn't that what we're fighting for, that individual freedom? The man came 3,500 miles to sing for you. Doesn't he at least deserve to be heard? And mumble, grumble. Everybody sat down. Sammy went over and changed the sheet music. He sang one song, and he got a standing ovation. He sang "I Gotta Be Me" from the Broadway
Wow.
play.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I've never
Gotta
seen
be me.
I've never seen anything like this in my life. Excuse me.
Man.
He halfway through the song, we realized, you see what he's doing? He walked that stage, whether I'm right, whether I'm wrong, whether I find a place in this world or never belong. I gotta be me.
Yeah.
I'll go it alone if that's how it must be. I can't be right for somebody else if I'm not right for me. Halfway through the song, we said, you see what he's doing?
Wow.
He's getting that. At the end, a standing ovation. It's like, we still don't believe your politics, but that was pretty serious.
Wow.
In my lifetime, I've seen people take a tough crowd and get them back after an hour or 45 minutes. I have never seen anybody take a hostile audience and in one song get a standing ovation. That was the greatest single performance I've ever seen in my life. Sammy Davis Jr. was an extraordinary entertainer.
I saw him once in my life at the Greek Theater with Sinatra. And listen, I've seen Sinatra half a dozen times, always magnificent. Sammy is something to contend with.
Oh,
He came out, he did about 45 minutes or something. It was insane
yeah.
Wow.
how good he is.
There was nothing he couldn't do. He could sing as good as anybody out there. He never hit a clinker. Frank said he never heard Sammy hit a clinker. He could dance better than anybody out there. He could tell jokes as good as any comedian. He could do impressions, to me, better than any impressionist out there. He could play the xylophone. He could play the drums. He could play the piano. He was a great guy.
By the way, the only person that knows more of these guys, not actually more than you, we had George Slaughter on the show. And he worked with almost everybody.
Was he part of how you wound up working with Frank? Did he set that up?
No, he had nothing to do with it. George, from a production end of it, yeah. But I personally knew Frank, and I personally knew Dean, and I personally knew Sammy. I traveled with him. We went to dinners together.
Why haven't they made the Dean Martin story? They say Scorsese's been trying to make it for years. He's
trying to make he's trying to make the Sinatra story too. He recently said that he was gonna do it, and then he changed his mind, and now he says he's gonna do it, but he wants to do a movie about Jesus first before he does a movie about Frank. So it makes sense to me that he needs to step up a little bit.
Yeah, step up.
You, having worked
He
with
did the
Frank and been friends with him, you think I would be a good candidate to play him in the movie?
Danny, I didn't want to say this, but I was going to ask you after the show's over if I could.
He did the Last Temptation of Christ, and Scorsese.
Yeah. Scorsese. Was it Scorsese? No, I thought that was
No.
that wasn't Scorsese. That wasn't.
So what did he do? Scorsese did one about Jesus.
No, he's going to do one.
Let me ask you, Jew, altar boy, whatever you did.
Yeah.
You've gone to confession?
Have I what?
You've gone to confession.
In my childhood, many days, yeah.
But we don't do that. Cheers. What is that about? What do you? I mean, you go in. Were you honest? Is it funny to you?
No, I wrote a lot of jokes about that too. I used to say I never knew which girls to date, so I'd stand outside the confessional and see what girls stayed in there the longest. Whoever was in there the longest. I said, Mary Jo, I said, Beverly Capilotto used to stay. When Beverly Capilotto came out of the confessional, the priest would leave and take a cold shower, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Is Tim still around?
Oh, yes, Tim Reed. We just were together in Chicago doing a big interview about a club we used to work called Mr. Kelly's. When you worked at Mr. Kelly's,
Very famous
Mr.
club.
Kelly's.
it was
Sure.
Yeah, you made the big time when you got to Mr. Kelly's. Yeah.
Have you done an act together? Any?
No, not we've appeared together in interviews, and we always play off of one another real good.
Well,
I love the guy.
Do you think you could get on stage together and do an act now?
I don't think Tim would want to do it. And I always say. I always think about getting back with Tim until they hand me the check, and I realize I don't have to split that with anybody anymore.
But it'd be kind of cool to do it just even one more time.
It might be. I love him. He's like a brother to me. Everything I own, everything I have, is because I met Tim Reed, and he feels the same way about me. His children call me Uncle Tom. His children call me Uncle Tom, which is really funny. We wrote a book in 2005. Tim Reed and I wrote a book called Tim and Tom: An American Comedy in Black and White. So we were touring the country, promoting it. We went to Norfolk State College, where he graduated from, a historical black college. We were going to talk to the students, and prior to, they had a luncheon, and I was in line with 6 black college professors getting some buffet, and his daughter Tori walked in the room, and she hadn't seen me in a year, and she's clear across the room, and she starts shouting, Uncle Tom, Uncle Tom. And these professors turned around and looked at her. I said, she's talking to me. I went and hugged her, and I said, honey, you shouldn't be calling me Uncle Tom.
Sinatra. I used to do this. I tried. I never got it off. You could probably do this. I wonder if Frank Sinatra, like at home, when he wanted breakfast, if he sang everything. That was the setup. I go, I want pancakes this morning. Just. And then I dragged in Bob Dylan, or if Bob Dylan. What do you got for dinner?
I remember watching Dylan. I performed at Frank's 80th birthday. And Dylan was singing. And I know Frank was trying to be polite, but he couldn't understand a word he said. He was staring at Dylan.
Oh, yeah. He called him old blue eyes or something. Yeah. I did. That was the one where Rickles looks at Frank and his kid's sitting there. Do you remember this? And Rickles comes down and goes, Frank, congratulations, 80 years. And he looks at Tina and Nancy. And he goes, you're going to be very rich very soon.
Oh, yeah. He does that. He used to do that all the time. He was talking to Barbara one night, and Frank was trying to get his attention. We were having dinner in Frank's house in Malibu. And Frank said, Don. And Don was talking to Barbara. Don said, Frank, leave me alone. I'm talking to somebody who's coming into a lot of money. I used to love when Rickles would introduce me. And because to me, people say Rickles gave you the business. Well, if Rickles mentioned your name, you were a big deal. I wanted Rickles to pick on me when he'd see me in the audience, because give me that couple of minutes, because I'm Catholic. He would say, I used to do a lot of routines on the Tonight Show. My early Tonight Show was about growing up in Catholic school, going to Catholic school. Rickles would say, oh, we got Tom Dreesen out in the audience. Tom, stand up. He goes, Tom, you take a glass of water. He's throwing water on me.
One night I went to see George Wallace, and he's such a great entertainer, in Vegas. He had his show there. It was about 1,000 people, and he introduces me. He goes, we got Mark Schiff tonight in the audience, great comedian. And I stand up, and he says, stand up and wave. He goes, why don't you come, I didn't expect this. He goes, why don't you come up here and do a couple of minutes?
Really?
I go up on stage, he hands me the mic, and he leaves. And I have no idea how long he's going to be. He's gone. And there's 1,000 people, and so I'm talking. Like 10 minutes go by.
Really?
Who's this guy? And then he came back for like 15 minutes. And, what about Mark Schiff here? It's amazing.
It's amazing.
You forget, at that age, George had to pee.
That's right.
Yeah. So, George said, I got to pee. What am I? Mark Schiff's out there. Mark!
So I got to say, I hope you come back sometime, because it's such a pleasure to talk to you.
Well, thank you.
On so many levels.
I had a good time. I really did.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
And I'll validate your parking.
Mark's you've got some books you want to play?
I got a book which you read. Why not? Lessons on Comedy, Courage, and Chutzpah. I know we talked about it. And I got my Instagram, and I'm going to cut up my little comedy magic tapes that they send me. I'm going to put those on, TikTok and see if I can
Good
build
idea.
a big crowd in China.
Ah, good idea. Good idea.
I go there. It's 4 billion people. No, it's a normal show. That's a comedy club here.
Yeah.
Yeah, in my book, we talked about it. It's still standing. You can get it on Amazon. They'll have it in your house in 2 days. They're really amazing people.
2 days, then it's not a good book because my book you can get in 2 hours. So there you
So
Well, there's a lot of your books in stock. Mine too.
Wow! Oh, so fast.
very quick. I've got 2 albums out on Stand Up Records. You can get them at standuprecords.com, probably also on Amazon. And I've got comic books about my life at fairenoughcomic.com. And I will second Mark's invitation to have you back soon because I selfishly don't want to let you leave. I'm just enjoying this
Yes.
so much. So thank you.
I'm happy.
Thank
to hear
you.
that. Thank you.
Amazing.
It's fun.
We think it's funny. We hope you did as well. Please, if you like the show, don't keep it a secret. Tell your friends. Tell anybody. Tell your doctor. Spread the word. Leave us 5 stars and a nice review on Apple Podcasts. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. So you can follow us on all those things. And, of course, wethinkitsfunny.com, where you can get the mug. Everybody wants the mug. We'll see you next time with another fantastic episode. Bye.
Yeah, baby. Woo!